The Fed has completely lost its mind. I'm convinced. Welcome back to the channel. I am Mick Alfanine. This is an article from Axios.com. It's titled Federal Deficit Double. It's to double despite economic growth. What's going on with the Fed? Does anybody really believe the Fed knows what they're doing right now? You ever see children who just get into something, they have no clue what they're doing, and then the parent has to come in and clean up? Well, that's what the Fed reminds me of, except there is no parent to come and clean things up because the people are either struggling or they're too distracted. Let's read this article here. It says the federal deficit is expected to nearly double. We just talked about this. Double this year from about $1 trillion last year to $2 trillion for the fiscal year ending September 30th. If that doesn't concern people, I don't know what would. It says why it matters. There's no precedent for deficits this large as a share of the economy outside war, deep recession. Come on now. Let's Axios. Deep recession is a depression. A deep recession is a depression. Correct? And or the redacted, the redacted. First bullet point says the Washington Post Jeff Steen reported Sunday on the stunning projected figure from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Well, that committee is failing then because they've been highly irresponsible. I mean, I didn't even understand, how do you make a deal where you just remove a spending cap on the country's debt? You knew they were going to spend like a child that found their parents' credit card. It says between the lines, such huge spending imbalances contribute to high interest rates for consumers. Oh, interesting. Including mortgages. You don't say. Even though the mortgages, they're down right now. They came down a little bit right now, but they're still high compared to last year. It says in the long run, it means interest costs will likely squeeze all other federal priorities. What's happening? Bigger interest payments, lower tax receipts, despite strong economic growth. They keep saying strong economic growth. I feel like that's a highly manipulated statement. Where's the economy strong? I mean, that the people can actually experience and see for themselves. Where's the economy strong? I mean, you negate certain information when you're looking at how the country is doing, right? I mean, you negate things like energy and et cetera, right? It says a strong economy usually reduces the deficit. Not this time. Well, let's go over some things and let me explain. So the people, despite making more money, have a harder time affording the things that they need to live. That's one. Two, the banks are in big trouble with commercial real estate. That's two. Three, OPEC Plus has just cut oil. And so that's definitely going to affect inflation. You had Russia cutting. You had, I believe, Argentina cut. You have Saudi Arabia cutting. I'm sure a lot of others are going to be cutting production as well. So that brings about a sort of energy crisis, doesn't it? Right. So that means everything else has to go up in the long run, I would think. So the reality check. The annual deficit was even higher, $2.8 trillion in 2021 amid the redacted. All right. Well, either way, does this period of irresponsibility make the newer period of irresponsibility any better? No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. That's like my one child crashing my new Lamborghini and my other child crashing my new Ferrari. It's still bad. I don't want you to crash anything. Can we all just drive safely? Can we operate safely? And it's titled, Oil Prices Edged Higher on Monday on Expectations That OPEC Plus Would Keep Supplies Tight. That means they've been cutting. They just announced they were cutting. And speculation that the U.S. Federal Reserve will cease its aggressive interest rate hike campaign. That's not going to happen. I just don't see that happening. If it does, it does. I just don't see that happening. Last time they took their foot off the gas, inflation went back up. Now, wait a minute. OPEC Plus cut, correct? So let's go here. This is from Investopedia. It says crude oil is a major economic input. So a rise in oil prices contributes to inflation. So if they're cutting, there's less oil, then oil prices are going to go up. Then that definitely contributes to inflation. Then a heavily dependent nation like the United States would definitely feel that. Correct me if I'm wrong. It says, which measures the overall rate of price increases across the economy. Here's a little bit more for you. This one here is from Oxford Academic, if the other one wasn't enough for you. It says higher energy costs, oil, higher energy costs may also raise the cost of food processing, food packaging, and distribution. Now, this is all, we're talking about all of this in an economic climate in the United States where people are already making video after video and writing article after article about them not being able to afford enough food, right? They've been cutting back on food. You had that whole series of videos where people were actually showing the price of eggs in some of their areas and such like that. Now they're just showing their entire grocery pickup and, you know, with videos like, oh, I spent $100, $180. And they have this tiny bit of food is like 3 items. I don't know where they're shopping, but but that's what's going on. So, I mean, is the United States really prepared if prices go up more? And this is definitely something that could have been anticipated. Right. So, I mean, this is what we're looking at right now. Of course, there's a lot of different solutions. You know, they claim in the data that people have been spending, on a lot of nonsensical things, wants instead of needs. Correct. I mean, so people can cut a lot of the wants. But I mean, how is that how does that affect living for people? People want to live. They want to have a good life. Correct. They don't want to just, stay in these little boxes where you can't have good experiences. What's the point of going to work all the time if you don't get to play? Right. So we have this article here from forexlive.com, and it is titled Morgan Stanley forecasting that the European Central Bank will stop raising interest rates. Everyone wants them to stop raising interest rates, but they can't. And I don't think that they are. It says Morgan Stanley has changed their forecast for the ECB. Analysts at the bank were expecting an ECB rate hike at the September ECB meeting, but now says the rate hike cycle is over. Are you sure about that? Did the ECB make a call to the United States yet? Because they usually follow in the footsteps of whatever the Federal Reserve in the United States does. Right now, I can just imagine that conversation right now. The ECB, Morgan Stanley's talking to a head at the ECB or some sort of powerful figure, and they're asking them, hey, you're going to cut interest rates? And they say, wait, hold on, Morgan. And they dial their phone up and they call the Federal Reserve and say, hey, excuse me, Mr. Powell, are you cutting interest rates yet? They say no. European Central Bank hangs up the phone, says, Morgan, we're not cutting rates. Then the phone rings again and they pick up. Oh, hello, Mr. Powell. Oh, you are going to cut rates? They hang up the phone. Morgan, we're cutting rates. Pretty much what I'm saying is they usually do what the United States does. I don't know why that is, but we will see. It says Morgan Stanley cite data showing services inflation slowing in the euro area, drop in August services inflation to 5.5% from 5.6%, and also signs of quickly deteriorating economy. This is something I've been telling people for a long time. These economies are not doing well. Don't believe what they're saying in the mainstream media. A lot of them are paid off. All right. That's just my humble opinion. Don't believe what your governments are telling you because they have a vested interest to look good. They do not want to look bad. They do not want to be perceived bad. Even though you're suffering, they will tell you a lie right to your face. These economies have been deteriorating and the people have been suffering. And that needs to be taken note of by the people so they can remedy their situations with their own solutions. So now that you have that information, what are you going to do with it? I know what I'm going to do. So until next time, let's get to the money.